You know, there is no way it says this is right and this is wrong. There are a number of ways of doing this. We looked at this for a considerable period of time, and really I suppose our objective with this structure was to put something together that was logical and hopefully easy to follow, not just for IT, but for the users as well. And that's why we've broken it down into a number of different levels. The top level is just saying it's IT services. The level below that is hopefully identifying or breaking that down a little bit to say, well, is it personal computing services or communication services? And then below that, we go into the more detail there for communication services, for example, mobile phone. Hopefully that's relatively clear as to why or what that service is about. Below this, what you don't see on the slide would be the offerings. So under the mobile phone offering, they might be provide me with a BlackBerry, provide me with an Apple iPhone, or any of those parts. But in the structure of those services, I think the important thing is that we always kept in our mind the objective was to make this logical and easy to use. Say we've seen a number of different organizations with structures which match this. The words may be different, the actual descriptions may be slightly different, but overall they're kind of falling into the same type of groupings and logical structure. They might just call things different things, but generally it falls into a very similar type of pattern.
I think one of the things about this is that there are obviously a number of different ways of doing it. There's one question there about what's the sort of average number of services that you might expect to see in this depending on the size of the organization. I think we have, as our basic standard, we have quite a tight pool of high-level services, which is sort of 40 or 50, and then as soon as you start adding offerings around that, we're up to well over 100, and that's just a very basic, very basic structure. If you're in a large organization, you're obviously into hundreds or even thousands. But I think we took the view that actually keeping it really quite tight was important because it allows people to really focus on the types. And I think we also discussed the fact that the offerings there's only going to be a certain number of types of offering. How many offerings did we actually come up with as generics, and what was the thinking there in terms of structuring that?
Yeah, it's a good point again. Certainly when we were looking at this, I suppose it very quickly became apparent there was two ways of doing this. There was one way which was saying, let's create an offering for every conceivable request that the business might want, which would be very precise and very accurate, but would involve an incredible amount of work. Or working on the principle that actually there is probably only a certain number of generic offerings that people want, regardless if you're looking for a phone or a desktop or a computer accessory or even some software. Really, there's only a few things that you will be looking for. You'll be looking to get access to it, you'll be looking to upgrade it, or potentially remove it. So we took that approach and we came up with about 4 or 5 generic removes, adds, upgrades, installs, and basically used them for most of the services that we actually have here. Because, as I said, we wanted to try and keep it relatively simple, and again, we've always got to bear in mind that the more service offerings we add, the more work we're going to have to do. So we wanted to keep it simple, hopefully easy to maintain and manage, and as I keep going back to the point, try and make it as easy as possible for the end user. Provide a desktop, hopefully it's quite easy to understand. If we'd made it more complex or more detailed, maybe there might be some confusion, they wouldn't know what to choose, they'd phone the service desk, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of the thing in the first place.
I see another question which says, why is business one particular area within business and not communications? That's always a call. That's one of the things that you work through in your service catalogue workshop. And another question was, how do we get senior people involved? Well, you've got to get them at that workshop. They've got to be certainly at the first part of that, where they have to accept and understand that there's going to be this bundling effect. We're going to have to decide how to group our services together. I know when it gets in a bigger organization it becomes more difficult because you've got just the scale of it makes it more difficult, but that doesn't mean to say you can't start at the top level defining your high level services and start working down. So hopefully we've answered one or two of those questions there. We'll move on now. just the last question there now, which is very much around about where you might extend the use of your service catalog. Another question that we saw was, is this for internal or external IT? It can be for anything you like. Certainly can be for internal IT. Certainly it can be for external IT, and we're starting to use this ourselves to deal with our external customers. But the point being is that once you start using it, particularly in an internal scenario, you can start to use it for other things. So HR, we also have built structures of services similar to what you saw on the previous slide for things like HR and facilities as well. So that's definitely a useful question. The spread of answers there, not many are using it for marketing, but a number of you are thinking of it for HR, facilities, admin and training. It's fairly even spread of replies there. Facilities and admin are the two key ones. So new starts and leavers isn't just an IT issue, but repairing light bulbs and ordering desks and so on, all that kind of stuff should be easy to facilitate on this. Another question we had was about business case, which we covered in the last webcast, but yes, you can certainly add value from this by using it in other areas as well. Your HR and facilities people might be considering some kind of tool or hiring more people to do this when you can actually deliver it from IT without any additional cost. Okay. Any other questions there? Brian, you want to summarize now and just round up where we are with this?
Absolutely, yes. Just as a short summary then, a number of points I think are worth reiterating. We've made all these points during the presentation, but it's certainly worth reiterating them. And this first point really, again, ties into the question we had recently as well about how do we ensure, or we need to get involvement and buy-in from IT in the business. How do we do that? A number of different ways. I think one of the best ways is that once we can start to demonstrate to the business and to IT the benefits of introducing a service catalog, then we start to get them to buy into this. Making them feel involved in the process again gets them to buy in, and as we said earlier, making sure that senior management are seen to support this initiative will help to get that buy-in as well. The second thing that we would certainly recommend, as we talked about, is running a strategy workshop. Again, it serves as a very useful education exercise to get people understanding what service catalogs are and how they can benefit the business, but also should start the process of defining what you want to do and which services you will be actually implementing in your service catalog. Following that definition of the structure of the services, again we had a question about that. How do we define that structure? And as we said, there are a number of different ways to do it. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. Certainly, I keep coming back to the objective that we had when we were creating the structure of services was to keep it logical and to keep it simple and easy to use. And I think that's probably a fair rule in the definition of those services. We also need to define, once we've defined the structure, define what the services and the service offerings actually are. That is, which services and offerings are we going to offer, obviously, to our customers. But again, what information do we need to store against those services and those service offerings? The other thing we need to think about then is, once we've gone through all this and we've got a good understanding of what we're trying to achieve and what we're going to do, is then we should start to use, where appropriate, technology to help us in the definition, the population, and the maintenance of the service catalog. Technology is there to help us. There are products which can help us do this, so we should look to be utilizing those products to help us make this a success. And the final thing, really, the first thing we talked about was the service focus. Hopefully, the workshops, the definition of the strategies, the structures and the service offerings, will hopefully start to establish that service focus culture within IT, and will hopefully start to get IT and the people within IT thinking about, rather than thinking about kit, thinking in service terms itself.
That's been very informative. We're just looking through the final questions. There's a lot of good questions coming in. A lot of them I think we've answered in the the content. Some of them we answered in the previous webinar, which is available on our website, but basically, is there an ROI model? Yes, we have that. We can help you with that. Some of you have asked whether or not we have a tool. Yes, we have a tool, obviously. That's what we do. One or two things about practicalities. How long does this take? Well, that really depends on the organization. I think one of the things that you can guarantee is that the less engagement and buy-in that you have, the longer it will take. So the more time you can spend getting people together at the start and buying in and understanding what's involved. That's why we really focus on the workshop. The workshop is so important because it's a kind of a rite of passage. It's a kind of a function that allows a number of things to happen at the same time: education, awareness, understanding, comprehension.
Yeah, it's certainly valid points. I think the other thing to bear in mind, of course, as we said during the presentation, is that you don't have to do everything at once. So, if you want to actually give yourself a smaller scope to begin with, then you can maybe get this implemented quite quickly. I think it's one of the mistakes that many organizations make is thinking that they have to do everything at once. And once they start looking at that and realizing potentially what a large exercise that is, it puts them off. They don't actually do it. So think about the scope of the initial implementation, narrow it down where possible. Choose the good services, the friendly services, whatever, just to make life easier for you to start with, and hopefully that will reduce the actual implementation time initially.
Okay, thanks. I think one of the other questions there was in terms of time, and I think in terms of actually doing this stuff, you can pull together the information and design the services relatively quickly. A few days or weeks to pull that together. To put it into a system takes a bit longer. To get everybody to agree, it could take you months or longer, and that's the difficult part. That's the tricky bit, really, is making that work. So one of the key elements, I think, where we mentioned in our structure document, where we had the project and the customers on one side and the IT on the other, is making sure that whoever's running this has got quite a thick skin and is very much a delivery-based person, and also quite diplomatic. So Superman or Superwoman, I think, is required, but certainly somebody who's able to get things going. We've got some information there. We've got lots of resources available to you in terms of white papers and previous webcasts. We did one with Sharon Taylor at the end of last year, and we have 2 more webcasts coming up in the next couple of months. Next one is really more about integrating with the business, and then the final one is on reporting and metrics, and obviously is the real value coming out. We're talking about demonstrating value. Also resources on our website, lots of good information, and we are also updating what we're doing through Twitter and our service catalog blog. 1 or 2 questions before you leave, just to finalize, but I think some of those of you that we haven't answered directly have asked some quite specific questions, and we will respond to you directly on that in due course. And those of you that have asked for the slides, also, we will send them to you. So I'd just like to say thank you very much to Brian, and thank you for participating and listening, and we hope to talk to you again very, very soon. Thank you, and goodbye.